I once had a home. A husband and a life that looked perfect until they took everything, even my dog, calling her a corporate asset. But they didn't know I had a weapon, an old key, a forgotten account, and a revenge. Patiently grown like seeds, waiting under the soil until the harvest came. The air inside the downtown Orlando law office smelled of polish and quiet victory. Evelyn Hart, 62, sat across from the man she'd built her life with and the woman who had just dismantled it. Grant Hart looked every inch the self-made developer tan, silver-templed cufflinks engraved with his initials. Beside him, attorney Camilla Price flipped a stack of documents with nails the color of blood oranges. "Sign here, Mrs. Hart." She purred, her tone coated with the satisfaction of conquest. Evelyn's pen hovered. The list of losses felt unreal: the lakefront house she'd decorated by hand, the retirement fund. She'd managed the company shares she'd earned, and God help her Daisy, their beagle, now labeled a corporate asset under Hart Homes LLC. Camilla's smile widened. "It's standard practice. Assets must be properly reclassified." Grant didn't look up. "Let's not drag this out." Through the window, sunlight cut across the table like a blade. Evelyn finally pressed the pen to paper. Each signature felt like another nail sealing 38 years of marriage into a coffin. When the last page slid across, Grant rose, pocketing his Mont Blanc. "You can sue me if you want," he said lightly, voice dripping contempt. "But I own this town." Camilla leaned in close enough for Evelyn to smell her perfume. "Expensive, predatory citrus." "And the HOA," she added, with a wink. Evelyn gathered her purse, her hands trembling, but her eyes strangely clear. Outside, the Florida heat wrapped around her like a dare. She whispered to herself, almost a vow. "You think you own this town, Grant Hart? We'll see who owns the harvest." The motel room smelled of bleach and stale donuts. A flickering neon sign outside painted the ceiling pink every few seconds, like a dying heartbeat. Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed, wearing her old linen dress, staring at the single paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. She'd signed away everything this morning: her home, her company shares, even Daisy. The television hummed softly with late-night news about real estate booms. Hart Homes featured again. She turned the volume off before Grant's smile could infect the room. Her phone buzzed. Lorraine, her younger sister in Gainesville. "Evie, you sound awful." Evelyn tried to laugh. "Divorce looks good on paper, not so much on me." There was a pause, then Lorraine's firm voice. "Listen to me. Did you ever open Grandpa's old safe box? The one Dad kept after the Orange Grove burned?" Evelyn frowned. "That thing, probably empty." "Or not," Lorraine insisted. "He was old school. Always said he planted seeds for the grandkids. Check the credit union near Winter Park. The key's gotta be somewhere." Evelyn looked around the empty room's suitcase, half-unzipped purse on the nightstand. She pulled out her worn leather wallet. Behind a faded photo of her and Grant at their wedding taped to the back was a small brass key. Her throat tightened. The key was cool against her palm, heavier than it should be. Outside, thunder rolled over the highway, shaking the window glass. Evelyn whispered into the hum of the storm. Maybe Grandpa planted something after all. She slipped the key into her pocket and stood up. For the first time in months, she knew exactly where to go. Morning sun poured through the glass doors of Winter Park Credit Union, washing everything in citrus gold. Evelyn stood in line, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The brass key inside seemed to hum against her palm, warm now, as if it had been waiting. Next called a voice. Behind the counter, Mrs. Delgado, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, smiled kindly. "I'd like to check on a safety deposit box," Evelyn said. "Belonged to my grandfather, Harold Jensen. He passed in 1972. Delgado typed, frowned, then motioned to a younger manager, Mr. Kahn. They led Evelyn into a quiet side office that smelled of paper and old carpet. Kahn turned the computer screen toward her. "We still have the account, ma'am. Opened 1968. Never closed." Her pulse skipped. "Never closed." He nodded. "And it's unusual." The clerk unlocked a slim metal drawer. Inside sat a leather ledger, the edges cracked with age, and an envelope labeled, "For Evelyn someday." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, faded share certificates from Orange Grove Credit Union and a dividend reinvestment plan for the Coca-Cola Company. Each entry handwritten in her grandfather's careful script. $5 deposit, patience, grows fruit. "Mr." Kahn's voice broke through her haze. "Mrs. Hart? Your grandfather's initial deposit was $50. He added a few dollars every month for 40 years. Compound interest did the rest." He swiveled the monitor. Evelyn stared at the number. 1103, 827, 16. Her breath caught. "That can't be right." Delgado smiled gently. "It's math, honey. It's magic with manners." Tears blurred the screen. In that small fluorescent office, after losing everything, she realized she wasn't broke, just underestimated. As she clutched the ledger to her chest, she heard her grandfather's voice in her memory. Soft and proud. "Patience is a kind of harvest, Maggie girl. You just have to wait long enough to pick it." Evelyn wiped her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." Time to plant again. She walked out into the Florida sunlight, head-high ledger pressed to her heart, and the story was no longer about loss. It was about seeds finally bearing fruit. That night, the storm outside Gainesville rolled like a warning drum. Rain streaked the kitchen window where Evelyn and her sister Lorraine sat facing each other, a single lamp between them, casting gold over the worn table. The old leather ledger lay open like a relic from another life. Columns of neat numbers ran down the pages, decades of her grandfather's quiet faith in time. Evelyn traced one with her fingertip. He kept adding $5, $10, 40 years. "Who does that?" "Someone who knew you'd need it," Lorraine said softly, handing her another cup of coffee. "Now, what are you going to do with it?" Evelyn leaned back, eyes dark and steady. "I'm not wasting it. Grant thinks he buried me. But this," she tapped the ledger, "this is my shovel." Lorraine smiled. "Then you'll need a plan, a legal one." "I'll need a fortress," Evelyn replied. "A trust. Something clean, private. I don't want him to know I'm not broke until he's sitting across from me at his next board meeting." Lorraine reached for her laptop. "I know someone who can help. Jonah Reyes. He's an attorney, decent, hates bullies." Evelyn gave a slow nod. Outside, thunder cracked, shaking the window. She glanced at the reflection, her face lined, tired but alive again. "You know what's funny?" she murmured. "He stole my house, my dogs, my name on paper. But he never once noticed what I was capable of." Lorraine touched her hand. "Then show him." Lightning flashed, illuminating the ledger, those patient numbers glimmering like embers, ready to reignite. Evelyn closed the book gently. "Tomorrow," she said, standing, "we start with Mr. Reyes. Tonight, we let him think I'm done." Outside, rain washed the street clean. Inside, Evelyn Hart began quietly loading her first bullet, the one called Patience. The next morning broke clean and sharp, the kind of Florida winter day that smelled faintly of oranges and asphalt. Evelyn Hart parked her aging Corolla outside a narrow brick building that read Jonah Reyes and Associates, Corporate Law. Inside the office was small but precise dark wood shelves lined with law books, a coffee pot hissing quietly in the corner. Jonah himself looked like he'd been carved from calm, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair eyes that measured truth before it was spoken. Lorraine made the introductions, then slipped out to give them privacy. So Jonah began glancing at the ledger she placed on his desk. "You've had a change in fortune." I've had a change in purpose, Evelyn said. Grant Hart took my company, my home, and pretended I didn't exist. I don't want revenge. I want correction with receipts. Jonah smiled faintly. Then we'll do it properly. He opened a legal pad. You'll need a trust discreet, independent, shielded from discovery. If we build the right structure, you can purchase assets anonymously. Evelyn listened, the lawyer's words clicking into place like pieces of machinery. What would we call it? She asked. He considered. Something neutral. Something no one would trace back to you. Her eyes flicked to the sunlight pouring through the blinds, warm and gold. Sun Mist Trust, she said. My grandfather's orchard always looked like that in the morning. Jonah nodded, writing it down. Perfect. Sunmist will hold the funds and begin acquiring small percentages of Hart homes through secondary investors. Quiet purchases under thresholds that require disclosure. How quiet, she asked. He smiled. Quiet enough that Grant won't notice until you're sitting across the table again. They spent hours structuring the plan, routing the investment through multiple brokers, layering privacy protections, preparing filings so precise they'd glide under any radar. Evelyn's head ached, but her pulse thudded with purpose. Jonah poured fresh coffee. Evelyn, once this trust owns 10%, you'll have access to board reports. At 20%, you'll have voting rights. 21, she corrected softly. I want a chair at the table, not a seat in the corner. Jonah's grin was small but approving. Understood. As they finalized signatures, the rain outside began again, soft cleansing. Evelyn looked at the name Sunmist Trust, typed neatly on the legal documents, and felt something shift inside her. For the first time in months, she wasn't reacting. She was building. When she stood to leave, Jonah handed her a folder and said quietly, Patience is power, Mrs. Hart. They'll never see you coming. Evelyn looked back with the faintest trace of a smile. That's the plan. Outside, sunlight cracked through the rain clouds, scattering gold over the wet pavement, the same color as her grandfather's oranges. She walked to her car, rain dripping from her hair, the folder tucked safely under her arm. Behind her, a new future had just been notarized. 2 weeks later, Evelyn parked her Corolla outside Hart Homes' showcase property, a glossy white model home perched along the calm edge of Lake Eloise. A sign out front read, Wellness Retreat for Corporate Clients. She almost laughed. Grant hated yoga, and Camilla only stretched the truth. She smoothed her thrift store blazer and stepped out the winter air, sharp with the scent of lake water and cut grass. Inside, the house gleamed like a showroom dream, white marble counters, champagne flutes, waiting soft jazz humming through hidden speakers. Too perfect, too expensive. A young realtor in a fitted blazer approached with a practiced smile. Welcome? Are you here to view the property for investment? Evelyn nodded politely. Yes. My firm's reviewing some of Hart's developments for portfolio consideration. Her voice was steady, professional. Sunmist steady? The realtor beamed. Wonderful, let me show you around. As they walked, Evelyn's eyes cataloged every detail. Imported rugs, hand-blown glass fixtures, designer furniture straight from Miami. This wasn't a marketing model. It was someone's home. Their home. She stopped at a framed photo on the mantel. Grant in swim trunks, Camilla in a sun hat, holding Daisy between them. Her jaw clenched. Lovely staging, she murmured. The realtor chuckled. The owners like to keep personal touches during retreats. Makes the space feel authentic. In the office, invoices lay stacked carelessly. Evelyn glimpsed Hedder's executive wellness expense therapy and development retreat, wine pairing session, each paid by Hart Homes' corporate account. Her pulse quickened. Do you mind if I look around the study? Go ahead, the realtor said, checking her phone. Evelyn slipped a few sheets into her folder, clean clinical evidence. Then she noticed a flash drive plugged into the desktop. Label Retreat Accounts Q3. The realtor turned her back for a moment. Evelyn's hand moved before her mind caught up. She removed the drive and slid it into her purse. When she turned, a delivery driver stepped through the door, nodding at her. He looked about 25, nervous local accent thick. "Mrs. Hart," he whispered under his breath as the realtor moved away. "I recognize you. My mom used to work your garden. They fired her after the split." Evelyn's heart jolted. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. She told me to tell you some of your stuff's still in the basement storage. They never cleared it. You should check before they do." Then quietly, he pressed a folded note into her hand. "If you ever need proof, look in the downstairs office behind the wine fridge." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What's your name, Dylan?" "Thank you, Dylan." She slipped the note into her coat and left before the realtor could notice the change in her eyes, the spark of someone who'd just found the thread of a bigger lie. Outside, the sky had turned the color of steel. Wind rippled the lake as if warning her what came next. She slid into her car, clutching the flash drive. Grant had built his empire on charm and paperwork. She'd just stolen his paper trail. The old neighborhood looked the same: manicured lawns, citrus trees, heavy with winter fruit. But to Evelyn, it felt like trespassing through a ghost of her own life. Her house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, white shutters bright against the setting sun. Only now the laughter inside wasn't hers. She parked across the street engine, off watching through the big front window. The glow of the chandelier spilled onto the porch where once she'd planted orchids. Her heart kicked when a small shape moved inside. Daisy. The little beagle pressed her nose to the glass tail, wagging wildly the moment she spotted Evelyn. A soft bark, the one that always meant your home. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Hey, baby girl," she whispered through tears, stepping closer to the fence. "It's me." Then the door opened. Camilla Price appeared, silk robe cinched at the waist, a wine glass in hand. Her voice sliced the air. "Mrs. Hart, you shouldn't be here." Evelyn froze, blinking away the sting in her eyes. "I just wanted to see her." "She's a corporate asset, remember?" Camilla interrupted with a smirk. "Your husband documented her care expenses through the company, which means she belongs to Hart Homes now." Evelyn stared at her words, collapsing under the weight of rage and disbelief. Behind Camilla, Daisy whined louder, scratching at the door. "Please," Evelyn whispered, hating herself for begging. Just for a minute, Camilla's smile vanished, replaced by cold professionalism. "You're trespassing, Mrs. Hart. I suggest you leave before I call security." The door shut with a quiet click. The sound hit harder than any slam. For a long moment, Evelyn stood in the dusk, staring at her reflection in the glass. Daisy's paw still pressed against the window tail, wagging eyes confused. Evelyn pulled out her phone hit record and whispered, "Corporate asset. Denied visitation. Date and time logged." Her tears stopped. Her hand no longer shook. When she walked back to her car, her expression had changed. Grief was gone. Now she carried evidence. The elevator ride to the Hart Homes headquarters felt endless. Glass walls reflected Evelyn's calm exterior, neat hair, navy suit, quiet confidence. But beneath that, her pulse thudded like war drums. The receptionist barely looked up when she stepped into the lobby. "Name, please." "Evelyn Hart, representing Sunmist Trust," she said, smoothly sliding a neatly printed badge across the counter. The young woman blinked, confused, then nodded toward the conference room. "They're already seated." Evelyn took a breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. The room was all polished surfaces and a mahogany table, a skyline view, a half-empty carafe of sparkling water. Grant Hart sat at the head, flanked by Camilla Price, who adjusted her blazer with professional disdain. Around them, 5 board members murmured over quarterly reports. When the door clicked shut, every head turned. Grant's jaw slackened. Evelyn. She smiled politely. Good morning, Mr. Hart. I'm here on behalf of Sunmist Trust, a new stakeholder in Hart Homes. Camilla leaned forward. I'm sorry, what trust? Evelyn set her folder on the table, her voice steady. Sunmist Trust currently holds 21.3% of your company's outstanding shares. I believe that entitles me to a seat and a voice. The silence that followed was electric. Grant's hand tightened around his pen. That's impossible. We would have been notified. Not if the shares were purchased in small increments, Evelyn said lightly. Perfectly legal, perfectly invisible until the quarterly report, which as luck would have it, is today. A ripple of murmurs swept the table. Camilla's eyes narrowed. You can't just buy your way into this room. Evelyn met her gaze cold and unblinking. Apparently I can. Corporate law is quite clear on shareholder rights, as I'm sure your counsel can confirm. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, David Chen, head of finance, cleared his throat. If these filings are legitimate, she's entitled to participate. Grant shot him a glare sharp enough to draw blood, then turned back to Evelyn. What do you want, transparency? She said simply, starting with your wellness retreat expenses. Camilla's face went still. Evelyn slid a printed photo across the table. Grant and Camilla lounging by the lake, daisy curled between them, the company logo embossed on the patio. Towels glinted in the sun. Corporate asset maintenance looks expensive, she added dryly. The air crackled. One board member stifled a cough. Another hid a smile. Grant's voice dropped to a growl. You think this is funny? No, Evelyn said, gathering her papers. I think it's accountability. She turned to the board. I'll expect copies of last quarter's audit, and perhaps a line-item breakdown of executive wellness programs. Camilla's knuckles whitened. You have no idea what you're doing. Evelyn smiled as she reached the door. Oh, I do. I'm just getting started. When the door closed behind her, the room erupted into whispers. Inside her purse, the USB drive pulsed like a secret heart proof that Hart Homes Wellness was built on fraud. For the first time since signing those divorce papers, Evelyn Hart owned the room, and her silence was the loudest thing in it. Night settled softly over the suburban streets of Lake Eloise Estates, the same community Evelyn had once helped design. Now she walked its quiet sidewalks like a stranger in her own blueprint. The clubhouse lights were still on. Inside, the HOA board, run by the sharp-tongued Marla Denton, had just finished their monthly meeting. Evelyn slipped in after the crowd left, pretending to look for a misplaced file. A janitor, a graying man with kind eyes, nodded politely. You're Mrs. Hart, aren't you? Used to live on Citrus View Lane? She smiled faintly. Yes. Seems like another lifetime. He hesitated, glancing around before lowering his voice. I shouldn't say this, but folks here know the HOA's dirty. Marla's brother-in-law gets every maintenance contract, same company, triple rates. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Does she report to Hart Homes? He nodded. They fund each other. You pull one thread, the whole carpet comes up. She thanked him, slipping a 20 into the tip jar, then stepped outside just as a resident couple approached, mid-40s, tired faces. Are you that lady? They forced out, the woman asked quietly. Evelyn gave a small nod. Well, the man said, glancing over his shoulder. We've been getting invoices for landscaping on empty lots, all signed by Marla. But we haven't seen a mower in months. He handed her a photocopy. Hart Homes logo. Fake billing address signature identical to Marla's. This helps, Evelyn said, tucking the paper into her coat. As they walked away, her phone buzzed a message from Jonah Reyes. Grant's legal team is sniffing around Sunmist Trust. Stay low. They don't know it's you yet. Evelyn looked up at the glowing clubhouse sign, Lake Eloise HOA, a proud Hart community. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. Proud's not the word she whispered. Bought is. Then she turned toward her car, the photocopy pressed against her chest like ammunition. The threads were unraveling, and she was ready to pull. The next morning, the conference room of Hart Homes felt colder than the air conditioning should allow. A light drizzle smeared the windows, streaking the city skyline in gray. Evelyn set her folder on the table like a blade being unsheathed. Grant sat at the head again, his confidence restored overnight, or at least rehearsed. Camilla, immaculate in a steel gray suit, scrolled through her tablet, pretending not to see Evelyn. "Let's begin," Grant said tightly. "Our guest from Sunmist Trust has requested to address the board." Briefly. Evelyn rose. "Thank you. I'll be brief but not shallow." She spread out a series of color-coded sheets across the table. "During my review, I discovered multiple irregular expenditures within the past year." Camilla's pen froze mid-tap. These, Evelyn continued sliding the first page forward, are invoices for a wellness retreat totaling $78,000, lodging, catering, and something called executive equine therapy, all billed to corporate funds. A murmur rippled through the board. Evelyn lifted the next page. "Here we have wardrobe expenses categorized as professional development." She turned another. "And here, therapy sessions under executive coaching. Yet the therapist's office is conveniently located next to your private home, Mr. Hart." Grant's jaw tightened. "These are legitimate morale initiatives." "Interesting morale," Evelyn said softly, sliding over a glossy photo Grant and Camilla in swimsuits on the retreat deck. Daisy curled between them. The company logo stamped on every towel. Even your corporate assets seem to enjoy the perks. A few board members couldn't hide their discomfort. One coughed into his hand. Camilla leaned forward, her tone sharp. "Where did you get these from the company's own archives?" Evelyn replied. "Transparency, remember. That's what shareholders are promised." She dropped another set of documents, HOA contracts, signed by Marla Denton with inflated fees and duplicated work orders. Hart Homes overbilled its own homeowners through shell maintenance firms, some owned by Ms. Denton's relatives, all approved by the CEO's office. Grant slammed his palm against the table. "You're twisting numbers and gossip into conspiracy." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Then open the books. Authorize an independent forensic audit. If I'm wrong, it'll clear you." Silence. Then David Chen cleared his throat. "She's right, Grant. We need transparency. Too much smoke not to check for fire." Camilla's voice turned icy. "This motion is unnecessary." "It's legal," Evelyn interrupted, "and I move for a vote." 5 seconds of stillness stretched into forever. Then one hand lifted, then another. 5 in favor, David announced. 2 opposed. Motion passes. Grant's knuckles whitened. "You have no idea what you've done." Evelyn gathered her folders. "On the contrary, I've just asked for the truth. Whatever it turns out to be." She turned toward the door, pausing as the tension strangled the room. "By the way," she said over her shoulder from now on, "you might want to keep your corporate assets on a tighter leash." Camilla's face went pale. She understood the meaning, Daisy. The photographs, the proof. Outside, Evelyn exhaled slowly. The rain had stopped. Sunlight bled through the clouds, catching in the glass towers around her. The audit was coming. The walls were closing. And for the first time, Grant Hart would have to play by someone else's rules. The wipers beat a slow rhythm as Evelyn's Corolla crawled through the rain-slick streets. She'd felt it for 3 days, now that prickle at the base of her neck, the car that always seemed to appear 2 lanes behind. Tonight, she decided to stop pretending it was coincidence. She turned suddenly onto a quiet side street, the kind lined with dark porches and puddles reflecting streetlights. In her mirror, the silver sedan hesitated, then followed. "Got you." Evelyn pulled over near a shuttered bakery, popped her umbrella, and stepped out, as if checking a flat tire. The sedan rolled closer, engine-low windows fogged. Then the driver's side cracked open. A man in his 40s, weary face under a baseball cap. Ma'am, Mrs. Hart. Her pulse jumped. Who's asking? He sighed, voice hoarse from too many cigarettes. Name's Pete Larkin, private investigator, hired to keep an eye on you. By who, she said, though she already knew. Grant Hart. Pete admitted. He wanted updates where you go, who you meet. But he hasn't paid me in 3 weeks. Figures. Evelyn stared, rain streaking her face part. Fury part disbelief. So, what now? You sell me out twice. Pete shook his head. No, ma'am. You didn't deserve what they did. I got photos of Camilla's meetings, Grant's offshore calls, receipts for their consulting trips. You want them. They're yours. He pulled a small envelope from his coat and placed it on the hood. Inside, timestamps receipts, even a shot of Grant entering a law office labeled Pine Horizon LLC. Evelyn met his eyes. Why help me? Because some jobs stop feeling like work, he said, stepping back into the rain, and because people like him never think the help's watching. She watched his taillights vanish into the mist. Then she opened the envelope under the flickering streetlight water, blotting the ink. Every page was another crack in Grant's empire. Evelyn smiled for the first time that night, a sharp, quiet smile. He'd wanted to track her moves. Now she'd track his downfall. Morning light spilled over Citrus View Lane, washing the quiet neighborhood in gold. Evelyn parked a few houses away from her old home and waited until a familiar figure stepped out with a watering can, Helen Rourke, her former next-door neighbor. Evelyn crossed the street, heart thudding. Helen. The older woman froze, then her face softened. Evie, Heartlord, it's been months. You look thinner and stronger. Evelyn smiled faintly. Both are true. She glanced toward her old porch. I need to ask you something. About Daisy. Helen's eyes clouded. She set the watering can down and lowered her voice. That poor little thing. They leave her alone all the time. I hear her crying when they're gone. Evelyn swallowed hard. You're sure? Helen nodded. I even took video last week. Daisy scratching at the door for hours. No food, no water. I wasn't going to get involved, but after seeing you on the news about that board meeting, I figured you were fighting something bigger. Evelyn blinked. You saw that? Helen's smile turned proud. Whole town did, honey. You showed those people class. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small flash drive wrapped in foil. I don't know if this helps, but here. Time-stamped footage. Might be what you need to prove neglect. Evelyn took it with trembling hands. Helen, you might have just saved her life. The woman chuckled softly. Or maybe just helped her find her way home. For a moment, they stood in the golden light, the hum of sprinklers filling the silence between them. Evelyn looked toward the house one last time, the curtains drawn, the life stolen, and whispered, Hang on, girl. Mama's coming. Then she turned back to her car, closing her hand around the flash drive, like a vow. Rain tapped against the window of Jonah Reyes's office as spreadsheets glowed across 2 monitors. Evelyn sat beside him, the air thick with the smell of coffee and anticipation. Jonah scrolled through the files Pete Larkin had delivered. Bank transfers, offshore correspondences, coded invoices. This, he said, tapping the screen isn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it's architecture. Evelyn leaned closer. Meaning your ex built himself an escape hatch. He enlarged a document header, Pine Horizon LLC, registered in Delaware, 0 employees, listed as prospective acquirer of Hart Homes. Evelyn's chest tightened. He's selling the company to himself. Jonah nodded grimly. Classic shell game. He bleeds the business, sells it to his own holding, then vanishes with the cash before the audit lands. It's genius if you don't get caught. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Then let's make sure he does. They began connecting dots. Transfers from Hart Homes to consulting partners. Wire trails leading to Pine Horizon's accounts. Each link tightened the rope. Jonah's pen scratched furiously. "Once we have 3 months of statements, we'll prove intent to defraud shareholders," he said. "But we'll need the board on record." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Then we call a meeting." Jonah looked up. "You're ready to confront him?" She smiled faintly. "He once told me I didn't understand business. Time to return the lesson with compound interest." As thunder rolled outside, Evelyn gathered the printed statements into a neat pile. At the bottom lay a single email chain from Camilla's account to Pine Horizon's attorney. Subject line: "Finalize sale post-audit freeze." Jonah glanced at it, then back at her. This alone could bury him. Evelyn's voice was calm, steady as the storm. "No, it'll expose him. The burying comes later." She rose, tucking the folder beneath her arm. Outside, the rain had turned to a fine mist, the kind that coats everything quiet but unstoppable. Tomorrow, she'd walk back into the boardroom not as a shareholder, but as the reckoning Grant Hart never saw coming. By noon the next day, the skyline over Orlando glimmered under stormlight clouds like bruises gathering behind the glass of Hart Homes Tower. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with tension. The emergency meeting Evelyn had called was about to begin. She stood at the far end of the table, papers stacked in front of her, while Grant paced like a trapped animal. Camilla sat tight beside him, jaw clenched, scrolling her phone for updates that never came. "State your purpose," Grant barked. "Some of us still have a business to run." Evelyn's voice was calm. "That's precisely what I'm trying to save." She clicked a remote. The projector lit up a web of accounts, company names, and wire routes stretching like veins across a glowing screen. "This," she said evenly, "is the skeleton of Pine Horizon LLC. A company registered 3 months ago. No staff, no assets. But somehow it's in negotiation to acquire Hart Homes for $14 million. Murmurs rose around the table. One board member frowned. 14? We're valued at nearly double that." Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. It's a fraudulent self-sale. Pine Horizon is Grant's shell. Every transaction, every wire path she tapped the screen, leads right back to him." Grant's face darkened. "You can't prove intent." "Oh, I can," she said softly, sliding an email across the table. Camilla's own correspondence to Pine Horizon's lawyer: "Finalize sale post-audit freeze." Camilla's phone slipped from her hand. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Grant turned on her instantly. "You sent that." Her voice trembled. "You told me to handle it." "Don't you dare," he hissed. Evelyn let them unravel. The board watched stunned as the couple's alliance dissolved before their eyes. Then she spoke again, voice steady, deliberate. "The audit is already underway. What we decide today will determine whether Hart Homes survives or collapses under federal investigation. So I'm calling for a vote to suspend Grant Hart as CEO pending full inquiry and to appoint temporary oversight." Camilla swallowed hard. "You can't just, I can." Evelyn cut in. "And I will." David Chen raised his hand first. Seconded. One by one, hands followed Maria Santos, 2 independents, then the corporate attorney. 5 in favor. David announced. 2 opposed. The air seemed to crackle. Grant's face went crimson. "You're destroying everything we built." Evelyn met his fury with quiet precision. "No, Grant. I'm saving what's left of it." Camilla's phone vibrated again. She looked down, color draining from her cheeks. The message preview was visible to everyone nearest her. Bar Association inquiry. Urgent response required. Her breath hitched. Evelyn tilted her head. Rough day at the office. Camilla rose, abruptly gathering her things. "This meeting's over." "No," Evelyn said. "Your tenure is?" For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Camilla walked out, heels echoing down the hall. Grant stood alone at the table, sweating under the fluorescent light. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," Evelyn said, collecting her papers. "It makes me responsible." As she reached the door, she looked back once more at the man who'd once owned her trust, her company, her life. Now he owned only the silence that followed his fall. Outside, the storm finally broke thunder, rolling like applause. The lake reflected the dying orange of evening when Evelyn saw her car's shadow lengthen and another figure step from it. Camilla Price, no makeup, hair unkempt, eyes swollen from nights without sleep. The storm that had ripped through the boardroom still clung to her. "May I sit?" Camilla asked quietly, clutching a folder like a confession. Evelyn gestured to the bench beside her. "It's a free country. For now." For a long moment, only the sound of the water filled the silence. Then Camilla said, "You won. He's finished. But he's not going down alone." Evelyn studied her face. "What are you saying?" Camilla opened the folder. Inside were emails, offshore statements, and signed directives. Grant's orders, not hers. He used me, Evelyn. Every false bill, every shell transfer, he wrote them. I just filed what he told me. "Convenient defense," Evelyn murmured. Camilla's voice cracked. "I'm being investigated by the bar. I'll lose my license, maybe my freedom. But I can still make it right if you'll help me testify." Evelyn looked toward the sunset, bleeding into the lake, her reflection, beside the woman who had once stolen everything from her. "You're asking the woman you helped destroy to save you." Camilla's eyes glistened. "I'm asking the only one who still believes in justice more than revenge." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and citrus. Evelyn finally nodded. "You give me everything, files, contacts, account numbers. In return, I'll make sure the truth clears your name, not his." Camilla exhaled relief, trembling through her. "You'll help me?" Evelyn stood, gathering the folder. "I'll help the truth. Whether it saves you depends on how much of it you're willing to tell." As the sun sank behind the trees, two women who had once shared the same man now shared something far rarer, a common enemy. The model home sat in silence, moonlight glinting off its perfect glass windows. From the outside, it looked like every photo in Hart Holmes's brochure, serene, safe, untouched. But tonight, Evelyn was there for what the company had stolen and labeled corporate property. She crept across the lawn, the note Camilla had slipped her folded tight in her hand. "Basement storage, Daisy's there." The air smelled faintly of lake water and roses. Her flashlight's beam danced across the patio until she found the back door's electronic lock. A small red light blinked. She swiped the master keycard Camilla had given her. The light turned green. Inside, everything was too quiet. The scent of bleach and expensive candles mingled in the air. Evelyn moved softly through the hallway, her shoes whispering against marble. Then faintly, she heard it a whimper. Her heart lurched. She followed the sound down the stairs. Behind a stack of moving boxes, a small crate rattled. Inside, curled on a blanket, was Daisy, thin, trembling, but alive. "Hey, baby girl," Evelyn whispered, dropping to her knees. Daisy's tail thumped weakly, then faster, as Evelyn unlatched the crate. The little dog climbed straight into her arms, pressing her face into Evelyn's coat, like she was trying to disappear inside it. Tears burned Evelyn's eyes. "You're coming home, sweetheart. No more assets, no more cages." She carried Daisy upstairs, every creak of the floorboards magnified by adrenaline. Just as she reached the back door, headlights swept across the windows. Grant's black SUV. Evelyn froze. Voices outside. The click of an engine cooling. She slipped into the night before the door handle turned. Running across the lawn, Daisy held tight against her chest. The little dog didn't make a sound, only buried her nose deeper into Evelyn's collar. When she reached her car, Evelyn looked back once at the glowing house and whispered, "Not yours anymore." Then she drove away. Taillights vanishing into the dark. the heartbeat of her engine syncing with Daisy's against her chest, both alive, both free. The next morning, sunshine returned to Lake Eloise Estates, as if the storm had never happened. But word had spread someone had challenged the untouchables. By 10 o'clock, the HOA clubhouse overflowed with residents clutching Bill's photos and months of bottled anger. At the front of the room stood Marla Denton, flawless as ever in her coral blazer, gavel in hand. "We'll begin with new business," she said, coolly, eyes flicking over the crowd. "I understand Mrs. Hart has concerns." Every head turned. Evelyn rose slowly from the back row, Daisy's leash wrapped around her wrist. The beagle sat obediently beside her head, tilted as if sensing the electricity in the air. "Yes," Evelyn said, walking toward the front. Her voice carried with surprising calm. "I'd like to discuss old business first, the kind we've all been paying for, but never received." Murmurs rippled. Evelyn placed a folder on the podium and clicked the projector remote. The screen behind Marla lit up with scanned invoices, duplicate landscaping contracts, inflated fees, ghost maintenance. Each of these, Evelyn continued, was billed through Hart Homes Maintenance subsidiary, each signed by you, Mrs. Denton, on behalf of the HOA, and each routed to an account belonging to your brother-in-law's company. Marla's smile faltered. "These are lies." Fabrications from a disgruntled former homeowner, Evelyn, interrupted gently. "You mean shareholder? I now own part of Hart Homes, which makes me legally entitled to every record." The crowd stirred louder now, neighbors whispering, pulling out their own bills. A man in the front row stood. "That's the same company that charged me $600 for palm trimming. I don't even have palms." Laughter broke through the tension. Another woman raised her phone, scrolling. "Marla, this says pest control on vacant lots. We don't even have pests." Marla's face blazed crimson. "This is a smear campaign. You people have no idea how complicated property management is." "Actually," Evelyn said, her tone slicing clean, "I do. I helped build Hart Homes before your friend Grant turned it into a laundering machine. Now, with your cooperation, we'll fix that." A murmur swelled into applause. Evelyn waited for silence, then added, "We're calling for an independent audit of all HOA accounts, followed by a recall vote for the chair." Marla slammed the gavel. "You can't!" But the crowd drowned her out. Voices rose, hands lifted in solidarity. Even the janitor, the same man who'd whispered to Evelyn days ago, stood by the back door nodding slowly. When the vote passed overwhelmingly, Marla stood frozen, her authority stripped as neatly as a title deed. Evelyn gathered her folder and turned to the crowd. "This neighborhood was built to be beautiful," she said softly. "It still can be, once we stop letting greed paint the walls." Applause thundered, rolling through the clubhouse like wind through orange trees. As Evelyn stepped outside, the air smelled sweet again, the kind of sweetness that follows truth finally spoken. Daisy trotted beside her tail, wagging sunlight catching her collar tag. For the first time in years, Evelyn Hart wasn't fighting alone. She had an army of neighbors, of witnesses, of voices blooming where fear used to grow. 2 weeks later, the marble hall of Orange County Civil Court buzzed like a hive. Cameras flashed outside, reporters murmured about the scandal swallowing Hart Homes, and for once, Grant Hart didn't stride in like a king. He was led in jaw-tight suit, rumpled eyes hollow. At the plaintiff's table sat Evelyn, her posture calm, precise. The quiet storm that had started it all. Beside her, Jonah Reyes shuffled folders, stacked with evidence, Camilla's testimony, HOA contracts, Pine Horizon transfer records. Every page glimmered with the paper trail of greed. Across the aisle, Grant's new attorney whispered furiously. Camilla sat 2 rows behind them, pale but composed, a sworn witness under subpoena. The judge adjusted his glasses. "We're here to consider injunctions related to Hart Homes and the suspension of CEO Grant Hart, pending investigation of fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Grant leaned forward. "Your Honor, this is a domestic vendetta parading as business law," Jonah rose. "With respect, Your Honor, the evidence says otherwise." He pressed a button on the monitor. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a screen displayed a chart of wire transfers. Jonah narrated steadily, "Funds labeled consulting fees routed through Pine Horizon LLC, then back to Hart's private offshore account. Combined total $3.8 million, filed under marketing development." Grant's face drained of color. Jonah clicked again. "And this Camilla Price's sworn affidavit confirming Mr. Hart ordered those transfers personally." A collective murmur filled the courtroom. Evelyn didn't move. Her eyes never left him. The judge rapped his gavel once. "Given the volume of evidence and corroborating testimony, the court grants a full audit and orders immediate suspension of Mr. Hart's executive powers. The matter will be referred to the state's attorney for potential criminal charges." Grant's lawyer sputtered, but the judge's tone ended the argument. Motion carried. For the first time in years, Grant Hart looked small. Not defeated, just suddenly visible, stripped of illusion. As court adjourned, Evelyn gathered her papers quietly. Camilla approached, voice trembling. "You did it." Evelyn shook her head. "We did. The truth did." Outside cameras flashed again, but Evelyn didn't stop for interviews. She walked down the courthouse steps into a sudden burst of sunlight. Reporters shouted her name. She only smiled faintly. At the bottom of the steps, David Chen waited with the board's statement in hand. "It's official," he said. "The board voted to make you interim CEO. They want you to lead the recovery." Evelyn looked at the courthouse behind her, a building of stone and judgment, and then at the sunlight ahead. "I'll lead," she said softly, "but not for power, for repair." Daisy barked once from the car, as if seconding the motion. Evelyn turned toward the noise and smiled the kind of smile that comes only after surviving fire and walking out carrying the matches. Justice at last had a name again, and it was hers. The offices of Hart Homes no longer smelled of cologne and ambition. Now the air carried the clean scent of paint and new beginnings. Workers hammered, scrubbed, and laughed sounds Evelyn hadn't heard in this building for years. She stood by the glass wall overlooking the city, sleeves rolled up, a simple mug of coffee in hand. Her nameplate read, "Evelyn Hart, Interim CEO." It still felt surreal. "Morning, Ms. Hart," said David Chen, stepping in with a box of files. The audit team's finished. "We found another $500,000 misclassified as executive perks, all redirected to the recovery fund." Evelyn smiled. "Good. Let's make it public. People deserve to see where their money's going." David grinned. "Already drafting the press release." He paused, looking at the photo on her desk. Evelyn and Daisy at the lake, both windblown and happy. "You know, he said the staff's been calling her our new mascot." Evelyn chuckled. "She's the only executive around here who never lied." When he left, she opened the new proposal binder. Inside were plans for affordable housing initiatives, sun-mist homes for families, dedicated to first-time buyers and retirees, priced out of their neighborhoods. It wasn't revenge. It was repair. Outside construction crews lifted new beams into place, the start of a model community meant to replace the shell developments Grant had used for profit. For the first time, Hart Homes was building for people, not ego. Evelyn walked through the halls as sunlight poured through the high windows, catching in the dust like glitter. The employees looked up, smiling, nodding. There was no fear anymore, no hush when the boss entered. In the lobby, Daisy wagged her tail as visitors bent down to pet her. Evelyn crouched to scratch behind her ears. "We're home now, baby," she whispered. "And this time, it's ours." Then she straightened, watching the workers raise the final beam, engraved with 3 words she'd chosen herself: integrity, community, hope. For the first time in decades, Hart Homes was finally living up to its name. Night had settled softly over the quiet house. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, Daisy asleep beside her feet, the world finally still. In front of her lay the old ledger, its pages' yellowed corners curled like leaves after harvest. She opened it one last time. Between two brittle pages, an envelope waited, the one she'd never dared to open until now. On it, written in her grandfather's looping hand, for Evelyn, when the soil finally feels right. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter. My Maggie girl. If you're reading this, you've weathered more than most. I started that little account not for wealth, but to remind you that small things tended faithfully grow strong. Money will come and go, but patience. Patience is the only compound interest that never fails. When the world cheats, you don't let it make you smaller. Grow again. That's the only way we win. Grandpa Harold, 1968. Tears blurred the ink, softening the old paper's creases. Evelyn leaned back, eyes shimmering in the lamplight. She'd lost everything, her marriage, her home, her pride, and yet from one seed of quiet love planted half a century ago, she had rebuilt her life, her company, her name. The city lights outside blinked like distant harvest fires. She smiled through her tears. Patience. Grandpa, she whispered. You were right. It finally grew. Daisy stirred, padding over to rest her head on Evelyn's knee. Evelyn laughed softly, wiping her eyes. We did it, girl. We really did. She slipped the letter back into the ledger, closed it carefully, and whispered a final promise into the quiet night. I'll keep planting. Outside, a soft wind rustled the orange blossoms, the scent of memory and renewal. The same wind carried her laughter out through the open window light and free as the first dawn light crept across the horizon. Spring sunlight spread across sun-mist village, glinting on rows of freshly painted homes. Laughter hammers and the smell of pancakes from food trucks filled the air. The grand opening of Sun-Mist Homes, the community Evelyn had promised would rise from everything Hart Homes once destroyed. A banner fluttered across the entrance, built with integrity, grown with hope. Evelyn stepped up to the small wooden stage, dressed simply in cream linen, Daisy trotting proudly beside her, wearing a tiny orange ribbon. The crowd workers' families, neighbors, and reporters quieted as she touched the microphone. When I started this, she began, voice steady, but warm. I wasn't building houses. I was rebuilding trust, the kind that was broken by greed, by betrayal, and by forgetting what community means. Faces in the crowd turned toward her. Lorraine smiling through tears, and beside her, Camilla humble in jeans and a soft blouse, volunteering quietly among the new residents. Redemption had its own kind of architecture. Evelyn thought quiet, unseen, but sturdy. She continued, These homes aren't monuments to profit. They're proof that even the smallest seed, a $50 account, a neighbor's kindness, one act of courage can bloom into something that shelters us all. Applause rippled through the morning air. Daisy barked once, perfectly timed, making everyone laugh. Evelyn looked around at the rows of affordable homes, the playground already alive with children, the orange trees planted at every corner. My grandfather used to say, patience is the soil where miracles grow. He was right. And today we get to live inside one. The mayor stepped forward with a golden key, handing it to her. Cameras flashed, but Evelyn barely noticed. She bent down, pressing the key into a little girl's hand, the first family moving in. It's your turn now, she said softly. Take care of it. As the crowd cheered, Evelyn glanced toward the horizon, where the sunlight touched the roofs in gentle gold. For a heartbeat, she imagined her grandfather standing among them, hat tilted, smiling proud. She closed her eyes, breathed in the scent of oranges and new beginnings, and whispered, Harvest time. The music swelled, Laughter rose, and Evelyn Hart survivor builder daughter of patience finally stepped down into the village she had grown from ashes. And the wind carried her name through the blossoms, like a blessing fulfilled. How did this story touch you? Tell us in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. If it moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Tap the so you won't miss our next emotional story. And before you go, click on the end screen to discover more powerful, heartwarming tales waiting just for you. See you in the next story.